He may have been written off, but he did not write back. Taijuan Walker is back on the mound for this Philadelphia Phillies team in a much different role, pitching out of the bullpen, and is looking like the best version of himself. Could this new version of Taijuan Walker help the Phillies bullpen problem? And has this man reinvented himself as an impact part of this team? Those are the questions that I do want to dive into and answer in this video on Phillies Digest here. We, of course, are coming off the first career save of Taijuan Walker. Him doing something that no one in Phillies history has ever done, closing things out that game and earning himself the first career save. So going to dive into each of that in that video here. But before I get fully kicked off, do want to remind you guys, as always, to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. At this point in time, only about 30% of you guys watching these videos have subscribed to us here on Phillies Digest. So let's get those numbers growing. Let's get this Phillies Digest family popping, and we got a lot more good baseball to break down. So to start off with things, I do want to acknowledge exactly what went down with Taijuan Walker. I think this sums it up pretty well. As this article writes, his 3 innings pitched on Wednesday in his first relief appearance of the season, only allowing 1 hit and striking out 7 in a 7-0 win over the Tampa Bay Rays, was the best outing any Phillies reliever has had this year. After having the 14th best bullpen ERA in last year's regular season at 3.94, that unit fell apart in the postseason, allowing 16 earned runs in 20 innings and 11.37 ERA. And this season now has the 23rd bullpen ERA at 4.66. The Phillies allowed Jeff Hoffman, who prior to his most recent outing against the Los Angeles Angels, had allowed just 2 runs over his first 16 innings with the Toronto Blue Jays, to walk, and replaced him with Jordan Romano, who has a 10.22 ERA. Now, before I dive too deep into each, do just want to note the bullpen ERA moving in the right direction, that we've seen them go from 30th to 29th to 25th to now 23rd after Taijuan Walker helping out that cause. And a couple other notes on that. Jordan Romano looking much better of late, and I'm encouraged, and I do believe it's pronounced Romano. I have it ingrained in my head the wrong way, and I'm going to have to work to break that one. Romano rolls off the tongue a lot easier for me. But no worries, I will get the man's name right as it comes to things. The Jeff Hoffman conversation, I hear you on their critiques, and unfortunately this is going to be a story of the test of time will tell, as there were some clear medical red flags. It was not just the Phillies that were gun shy or hesitant in signing him. The Orioles and the Braves both entered those conversations and decided that they did not trust the future of his arm to commit to some significant numbers there. So there is a world where his arm completely falls apart, and the Phillies are looking like the smart person there. I'm not rooting for that for Jeff Hoffman. I'm quite frankly very much a fan of him in the bullpen, and he's been excellent this year for the Blue Jays thus far. But to bring this back to Taijuan Walker, let's highlight just how excellent this performance is. Now, we saw Taijuan Walker's 7 strikeouts in a save situation ties the Phillies record. The only other guy to do it was Jack Meyer in a 4-3 win over the Dodgers in 1958. And I do want to note, I was unaware of this save rule, which does seem to be a little bit of a baseball nuance that I seemingly forgot here. Now, the definition of a save, we all know, 3 runs or less in sort of a high-leverage situation to close out a game. There is a little asterisk next to this, as the full definition of a save on MLB.com is a relief pitcher recording a save must preserve his team's lead while doing one of the following: enter the game with a lead of no more than 3 runs and pitch at least 1 inning, enter the game with the tying run in the on-deck circle at the plate or on base, or pitch at least 3 innings. And that is exactly what Taijuan Walker did, as he cruised through the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, striking out 7. Think about that for a second. When we think of our version of Taijuan Walker, that in a Phillies uniform, even under the best of circumstances, was kind of getting hit around fairly easily there. For 7 of the 9 outs he recorded to be not even a hitter putting bat on ball is something there. And I got to say, that version of Ty is probably the best that I've ever seen him pitch in a Phillies uniform. Now, I'm not saying that this guy is going to completely reroute his career, but what I do see is there's something to this concept out of the bullpen. And dive into a bit more of the specifics here. I'm not going to dive too deep into the weeds here. You can see some of the pitching splits, but what is most important to note is this top portion here, saying maybe Tampa Bay was caught off guard at the sight of Walker entering later in the game than they are used to seeing him. Maybe his newfound velocity surprised them. Everything he threw, all of his pitches in his arsenal, ticked up a bit. Always a good thing for a starting pitcher going to relieve others. And that is a huge story with Taijuan Walker. We've been through stretches where his fastball was sitting at 89 or 90 at the early parts of last season, where he really was at his worst. Now, to his credit, even the version of him that we saw as a starting pitcher, he started 5 or 6 games, I believe 6, for this Phillies team before ultimately this change did come. He looked like a better version of himself. But that version of him coming out of the bullpen with the increased heat there matters. Now, from a bullpen perspective, it's obviously not all just straightaway speed for how hard you can throw a ball. There's got to be placement, there's got to be pitchability, and ultimately that worked for Taijuan. That he did get 7 strikeouts in those 9 performances, and this has to be the most confidence that he has as an individual has felt in a large time. Now, a couple other notes that I did want to dive into here. I first want to start with Taijuan Walker's quotes on things, and for Ty specifically, I think a lot of times when speaking from the Philadelphia fandom perspective, that when there is a big ticket free agent, and I wouldn't quite throw Taijuan in that category, although he did get a healthy sum to come here and be a regular starter for this team. When it does not work out, there tends to be the chase him with pitchforks out of town. Get him out of here. He's not good enough. Move on to the next. I don't feel that way whatsoever with Taijuan Walker, and all of that has been with his handling of this. He knows he has not been up to the quality that is commanded of him, and that has to be more frustrating to him than anyone else in this universe here. I think a lot of times we come down too hard on athletes because of this. When you think that guy doesn't want to be performing better right now, you don't think he's aware that he's underperforming to the massive, fullest extent to this point. Tobias Harris with the Sixers, a clear-cut example of this. If I understand he's not performing the expectations of fans, but he's not performing the expectations of himself, and he feels that as well. And I do think Taijuan is a guy who fits that criteria. And this article writes, Walker made 6 starts this season before the switch to the bullpen. When asked about how his preparation differs in the new role, he spoke about the uncertainty of when he'd be called upon. Quote, "Just staying ready," Walker said. "From the beginning of the game, I think being the long guy, you have to be ready. Anything can happen, so just be ready from the first inning and stay loose." Walker is in the bullpen because of Ranger Suarez's return from the IL. Suarez, who missed all of April while recovering from a lower back injury, was ineffective in his first start, allowing 7 runs in 3.2 innings. While the Phillies haven't given any indication of it, Walker is staying hopeful that he can return to the rotation sometime this season. Quote, "I feel like I'm still a starter, but it's such a great team, so many great starters, so these things happen." And to Walker's fullest credit here, he's been the utmost everything you could hope for in a teammate throughout this entire process here. Frankly, all last season, I give him a ton of credit for a guy that was at the top of the bullpen, cheering on his team, being the version of a teammate that you hope for. And that gives me a lot of leniency with Ty here. Now, as far as the Ranger conversation, I think the article is being a little harsher on him than he deserves. I get it, 7 runs in 3.2 innings is 7 runs in 3.2 innings. There is no way to kind of spin that. But watching that game there, it was a lot of just kind of leaking through the holes, a little blooper over shortstop. It didn't feel like he got hit around the way that his ultimate box score and results will dictate there. I think Ranger will settle in just fine. And honestly, he looked filthy in the first inning. Things kind of fell apart a little bit deeper in that game, but I'm not hitting the panic button about Ranger Suarez whatsoever. Now, when having this entire conversation about the starting pitching, the biggest factor that we have to acknowledge here is still Andrew Painter, that the organization as a whole from the Phillies continue to present it like the expectation that this dude will be pitching for the real team in the semi-near future, that he has been called up to AAA. He still seems to be taking care of business down there, and that is sort of the timeline that has to dictate. Now, injuries happen, and Ty should keep that mindset to stay ready, but when taking a look at this Phillies starting pitching, I don't really see a world where he is reintroduced. That we're talking about, of course, Zack Wheeler holding things down at the top, Jesus Luzardo in the overall sample size, who's been excellent thus far in Philadelphia. Aaron Nola, who's beginning to settle in off his rough start to the season, and I was really impressed by the version of him that we've seen in recent game. Christopher Sanchez, who dealt with a little bit of that forearm injury, and that will be something to note. Obviously, injuries do happen, and it's something to keep in mind, as Ty is a nice guy to have in the back burner for this. And then Ranger Suarez, who we just spoke about there. But none of these guys should be looking over their shoulder for Taijuan Walker. So that brings us to the conversation of what should Taijuan Walker be focused on. And frankly, I think we may have found his role. That not just being a long reliever, he's sort of that burner arm that you need. And I know that comes off a bit insulting here. I don't mean that in the most negative connotation here. But when games are out of reach, you need a guy to be soaking up innings. An innings eater is a fair way to put it, and I mean this in both directions. It can be like in that his debut, his first save of his career, where he is mowing down hitters for 3 innings and closing out a game. It also can be games in which the Phillies, fall out of favor, are down 14-7 through 6 innings, and you just need a guy to soak up the rest of that time. Probably a bad example of, if it's 14-7, maybe throw a little bit of life if you're throwing in 7 runs there. But the point being here that you do need just guys to get through it. And while I don't think Taijuan Walker is the cure to everything in the bullpen, I do think he's going to serve a really important role for this team moving forward. You have to get through 9 innings of every baseball game, plus some with extras and everything like that. You need guys to fill up those amount of innings pitched. And what I've seen from Taijuan Walker, he's willing to battle, he's willing to fight, and he's put that on full display all season, even when serving as the starting pitcher there. It won't be the end of the world if you need to throw this guy back in the starting rotation. It's not the best case scenario by any means, but when we talk about the wide scale of getting through the season, we have to be well aware of what a marathon baseball is, and having guys like Taijuan is going to be a huge asset there. I'm really excited to watch how he reinvents himself. If that velocity increase is legitimate, if that like strikeout ability, which again, I saw more killer instinct from him in that performance than I've seen really in his entire Philadelphia tenure. If that is here to stay, there's something there from a relief pitcher perspective. I'm not willing to exactly lock that in stone to this point, but I could not be more encouraged by the version of him that we saw at his first look in the bullpen. And if we want to be incredibly optimistic here, I'm not quite there myself, but to put it on the table, there are plenty of guys who have not been good enough as a starting pitcher perspective and have reinvented themselves as a bullpen pitcher. Jeff Hoffman is a clear-cut example of that. Was a guy who flamed out of the major leagues trying to be a starting pitcher there, and kind of flirted with the idea all of last season and into the offseason, which sort of rubbed me and I think a lot of Phillies personnel the wrong way on his outlook there. But that is a guy who's reinvented himself as a dominant relief pitcher. I don't know if Taijuan Walker is that. In fact, if I was a betting man right now, I would bet probably not to that answer there. But I will remain open-minded, and I would love for him to prove me wrong. So shout out to Taijuan Walker for stepping up, delivering in every way that this Phillies team needs. I'm encouraged at the minimum, thrilled at the maximum for what he brought from a relief perspective, and do think there's something to this continuing to translate moving forward. So it will not be in high leverage situations. It will be when games are out of reach in either direction for at least the short-term future. But if Taijuan earns his stripes and can begin to be a bit of a trustworthy arm in the bullpen, that is a huge deal for this Phillies team. So shout out to Taijuan Walker for making a negative a positive here, to finding a way to best utilize himself and make his impact felt regardless of how the cards are stacked against him or for him here. Could not be happier for him as a human being, as an individual for that performance, and it matters to this Phillies team. So shout out to Taijuan Walker, and shout out to you guys for listening to this video here. Once again, if you have not already, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button for us right here on Phillies Digest. There's a lot more baseball and a lot more storylines to get into, and I will be doing so from start to finish this season. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video here, and dropping any comments you have below. I'll be back talking to you next time. Peace.